Hi there and welcome. It is so good to have you with me today on this mini class about iridology. I am just going to encourage everybody who watches this on the replay to take a moment and like the video. Drop a comment. Comments are really valuable and they let me know that the information is reaching the audience well. Share it with a friend, subscribe to my channel, do all the good stuff. It helps to make the videos more visible to more of the audience, and it also helps YouTube to set its algorithm to make sure it shows you the kinds of videos you want to see. So again, welcome. Today we are talking about the history of iridology. Where did it come from? Where is it going? And why is this important? And a part of what we're going to do as we do some iris analysis later on is we are going to compare how I would have done it as a Jensenian iridologist 4 decades ago and how I do it now as a constitutional iridologist with the clinical practice aspect. I would love to know from those of you who are with me today, first off, do you have any background in iridology? Drop a comment in the chat box, not the Q&A box because that doesn't work, but the chat box. Let me know if you've got some background in iridology so that I can know how deep I can go or how high level I need to keep this today. And also, you'll find the more you interact with me in the chat box, the more you're going to get out of me in the next 45 minutes. So go ahead and drop some comments in that chat box. And it should be, I've got it set up, and you can just use it to send it to everyone. If you want to send it to me privately through the chat box, go ahead, whatever your comfort level is. All right. One of the reasons we need to study the history and the development of iridology is because iridology has evolved a lot in the last 4 decades. And the sad truth is that there are a lot of iridologists and iridology instructors who are still teaching either information as it existed 5 decades ago, or they are teaching a really strange hybrid mix of what they used to do and what they're learning now. And they're giving it a really weird context. If you were, when you were a child, if you learned Pig Latin, as we used to call it, I could never speak Pig Latin, but if you learned Pig Latin, kind of mixing English and some other rules that weren't really a language, that's kind of what they're doing. And it's not working well for people who want to learn iridology, and it's not working well for helping to maintain or establish the credibility of iridology. So, now, I'm not seeing any comments in the chat box yet. I want you to feel free to ask questions and post comments there. These mini classes are meant to be interactive. You will get far more out of them if you do ask questions and make comments in the chat box. And if you're having problems with that, I think I've got it set up right today. Just let me double check. Yeah, I've got it set up so everybody can chat. And so, but if you're having a problem, just use the little raise hand icon in your control panel and we'll see if we can help you. Professor Petty's saying, hey, thanks for that. Good to know that the chat box is working. Thanks. Good to see you. All right, we've got Sylvia from Ireland. Hi, Sylvia. And Professor Petty says, it is working. Strong muscles. I like that. Cute. Very cute. All right. I'm going to take a moment to introduce myself because I think it's important when you are doing workshops like this, these mini classes, that you understand where your instructor is coming from. So you've got context for it. I've been an iridologist of some level since like 1980, right? That may be older than some of you. It's over 2/3 of my life. I mean, holy doodle, right? And so I became a certified iridologist many years ago. And then I affiliated with IPA about 3 decades ago, but I let that affiliation go and re-affiliated with them about a decade ago. And so they make us update our certifications every 2 years. And when we do that, they give us badges. And so I've just got the last few badges on the screen for you. I'm not only a certified iridologist, but I'm a certified level 3 iridologist and a certified level 3 iridology instructor. Last time I checked, there were only 6 level 3 instructors in the world. And so I've got the training, and I've got that contrast of background from what we used to do to what we do now. Right. And I think that's a valid contrast, because what we used to do, I found, didn't work. And what we're doing now, the constitutional style, works beautifully. As I said, I've been in the industry since 1980. I've written many books that I self-published and self-distributed. They're all out of print now, except for the textbook that my students use in the dynamic iridology course. And that is only available to my students. It's a digital download for them. I've designed and taught all kinds of classes in herbology, the practical use of herbs, prenatal classes. I was a certified prenatal educator for a couple of years. I've designed and taught courses in iridology and women's health and children's health, all kinds of stuff. And today we're really focusing on the iridology aspect of things. I am also a professional nutrition coach. I'm affiliated with 2 Canadian organizations. And these are organizations where you don't just send them a fee and get your affiliation. You have to prove that you've got the training, right? You have to provide your certifications, and it has to be from schools that they think are good enough. Same with the Alberta Herbalist Association, professional member of that organization. And again, you can be a member at large, just sort of a public member, but to be a professional member, you have to prove that you've got training under your belt, and you've got to do upgrade hours for all of these organizations. It's crazy how many upgrade hours I do in a year. But this is important, because learning iridology without having a modality, without knowing herbology or nutrition or something like that, then the iridology is pretty useless, right? Because with iridology, you're assessing a person's health. You're assessing and asking questions, deeper questions about their health and where they're at, and figuring out where they want to go and how to get them there. But if you only have iridology, you can't figure out how to move their health, how to improve their health. You can only tell them what's wrong. And so you need modalities to help you with this. I've had people come to me having done iridology courses elsewhere, and they've said, well, how do I start a business? Well, what else can you do? Well, I can do iridology. Uh-huh. And what else can you do? And they don't have, their teachers didn't drill into them that they should understand the body with anatomy and physiology, but they should have nutrition, or be getting it. They should have herbology or be getting it. They should have homeopathy or be getting it. They should have modalities. And so these people are thinking they're going to start a business just with iridology. It doesn't work. And to that end, I don't like to let my students fail. And I don't want them coming into a course with me thinking that all they need is iridology and magically people will line up at their door. Doesn't work like that. And that's one of the things that I really work with my students in the extra mentoring I do with them, is I help them to get a perspective of how to have a business, how to establish a business, how to advertise their business, how to build their business. So important. So that was a side trip. Let's get back to the topic at hand. I tend to do a lot of side trips. And so here we've got the history, right? We've got iridology's been around forever. It originated, we've got documentation and indications that it was in Egypt, India, China, Greece. All the good stuff comes from back there, right? It all originated there. We used to, well, not me, but people used to think the world was flat. I wasn't alive when they thought the world was flat. I'm not that old. Now we know the world is round, the earth is round, but some people still think it's flat. They haven't kept up with the research. They don't understand everything that's gone into figuring out that the earth is absolutely round. Science evolves. We've all heard that, just follow the science, and we're all tired of that. But what I'm going to say is good science asks questions and looks for answers. Good science doesn't just say this is the only answer. Good science asks questions. And that's what we do in iridology. And that's what's been going on with the research that's happened in the last 3 to 4 decades. Iridologists have been asking questions and then have been designing studies to prove or disprove their hypothesis. And they've built on it from there. And this is so good. The challenge is a lot of people are hung up on this. Back in the 1800s, a young 11-year-old boy named Ignaz von Petzl somehow got a hold of the story. I've heard so many different versions of this story. Let's just settle that it was maybe an owl. Somehow this owl had a broken wing, whether it got broke as Ignaz was trying to capture it, or whether Ignaz came upon this injured bird. And this young boy apparently noticed that the the iris of the owl had a black line in it, and that as Ignaz nursed this bird back to health, that line healed. Well, we've got a couple of problems with this story. Couple of problems, and I'm going to tell you why we still love Ignaz. Couple of problems. Number one, don't you think that a veterinarian or a veterinary tech working in a bird sanctuary where they take in injured birds and nurse them back to health and then rehabilitate them, don't you think one of those people would have noticed the same thing in the birds that they work with? So that's the first question. I mean, it's been 200 years. Surely someone would have seen the same thing. The second thing is, an owl's iris structure is very different from a human iris structure. So we can't extrapolate from one type of animal to another. This is not a place like doing a lab study with mice and rats where you can begin developing the model. It doesn't work here. But why we love Ignaz is because even as that young boy, whatever he saw, it spurred him on to studying eyes. And he became a medical doctor, and he started hand sketching pictures of his patients' eyes, writing out their story, correlating their stories to what he saw. I can't imagine doing this without a computer database to, put in keywords and have it pull these files together for you. Can't imagine the work and the dedication it took. But he did that, and he began to draw an iridology map, which is absolutely brilliant. So we love that whatever he thought he saw spurred him on and laid a foundation for modern iridology. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Oops, that skipped a slide. Ignaz's uncle, according to Ellen Jensen, the uncle was August von Petschle, recognized years later that Ignaz was looking at an owl's eye and not that of a human, that he did not have the proper equipment to prove what had been recorded in the stories. So we need to leave that owl story behind, just honor Ignaz for the beautiful foundation he laid and move forward. So it's really important. Remember, he did his work with a 2-power magnifying glass. Those of you who have played with iridology know that a 2-power magnifying glass doesn't show you much. He also had some questions. He couldn't understand why some people had certain markings in their eyes and they had symptoms. Other people have the same markings, but they didn't have symptoms. Now we understand that that's how genes work. Just because you've got a genetic predisposition doesn't mean you will have the problem. And that's a part of what we work with now in modern iridology. We've got Pastor Nils Liljeqvist, who correctly identified that when we look at an iris and we see threads per square inch, the more threads we see per square inch, the more resilient this body will be. The fewer threads, the more gaping spaces we've got, the less resilient the body will be. And so that resilience means ability to resist breaking down, ability to resist contracting a disease or developing a disease process. Although Pastor Liljeqvist did think that the eyes changed due to toxic exposure, like to medications, but we now know that that is not true. We now know that when we see pigments in the eyes, this is simply melanin. It is genetically cued, and it gives us information. We know that these can develop over time in an eye. And when I say develop, that's probably the wrong choice of words. They can accumulate over time as the result of genetic predisposition, but not as the result of toxic exposure. Because these build as the result of genetic predisposition, it means that we cannot undo them. You don't change your fingerprint unless you scar your finger. Then we have Pastor Emmanuel Felka, and he also built an iridology map, and he also he defined what we now know as constitutions. He taught iridology. There's an institute in Germany to this day called the Felke Institute that teaches iridology. Did you know that in Germany you have to be either a Heilpraktiker or a medical doctor to practice iridology. In Germany, iridology is validated as a health science. We have Rudolf Schnabel in Cologne. He researched the pigment and pupil tonus. So he was, again, looking at the different colors that we can see in an eye and the pupil size and shape. He was one of the first people to actually look at an iris under a microscope. And of course, now ophthalmologists use and optometrists use slit lamp microscopes all the time. He also said, and I love him for that because we are still fighting this battle, it was no easy task, and those who believe or would like to believe that handling iridoscopy can be learned within a few weeks or even days are mistaken and do a disservice to a good cause. I'm here to say that the number of students I've had who have done 2 and 3 day workshops where they go and they just cram without an anatomy and physiology background usually, and then they're expected to know what they're doing, but they've only been taught markings. They haven't been taught how the markings integrate. They haven't been taught how to integrate what they're seeing with the client's symptoms, to ask the right kinds of questions, to create the right kinds of protocols. These short weekends, yeah, they don't work. They don't work. All right. So really need to be careful when you're taking a course in iridology to make sure that it's going to give you time to study, practice, apply, integrate. So important. When you go to university to study and to be a medical doctor, you don't take one class at a time and just do it for 7 or 8 hours a day for a week and then go off knowing everything that's in that, right? You take 1 or 2 classes in that course in a week, and you do that over many weeks so that you can integrate the information. The same principles have to apply here. There has to be time to practice, study, and integrate. Joseph Unger, I just love this man. I wish I'd met him. I want him to be my grandpa, right? He just looks so lovely. He was a student of Schnabel's. He became a naturopath. He was concerned that so many people who were teaching iridology had their own language, their own verbiage for things. And he wanted to unify the language. That was one of his key pushes. We're still working on that. We still have a lot of language differences in the iridology world. He knew that students were reading books and accepting the printed word about iridology before adequate research was completed. So he actually refused to publish his work until he had had his peers review it and analyze it and vet it, tell him that it was good or that it was bad and it shouldn't be published. So I love that he had the integrity to not just say, my word is the final word, but to say, this is the research I've done, and there's consensus that this is valid information. So important. Joseph Dack. You'll hear a lot more about Joseph Dack. I think he looks like a 1950s movie star, right? He could be right in there with Cary Grant and people like that. I'm a black and white movies fan, so I really appreciate his handsomeness. He was a dedicated iridology researcher, and he pioneered iridology photography. Very interesting. I mean, photography when he was alive was not what it is now, that's for sure. And he was also an iridology instructor. Notice all of these people are in Germany because iridology is recognized in Germany. Of course, they've got a wide open field for doing the research. Theodor Kriege in the 1900s said, oh, and I love this too, I hope that a later generation will succeed in establishing a single uniform system. We're still working on this, folks, still trying to get everybody on board. In spite of zealous efforts, these have so far not succeeded. Yeah, they're still not succeeding. He was a student of Unger, Dack, and Schnabel. He felt that iridology was a brilliant assessment tool and that it was best used combined with other assessment tools. So urine analysis, hand analysis, fingernail analysis, tongue analysis, feces analysis. He felt that it was a really strong point in the assessment process. Then we skipped a slide. There we go. Then we have Bernard Jensen, the beloved Bernard Jensen. Again, I would have liked him for a grandpa. He What we love about Bernard is notice the years that he was alive. So for many of these years, he was using iridology as he knew it, as he had learned it. And it was using a lot of the theories that the eyes change when we have toxic exposure, that we can dissolve pigments from the eyes, that we can change fiber structure in the eyes, because that's all he had. But he single-handedly kept iridology alive in North America when we could not get information from Central Europe, when there was nothing coming through because of the Cold War, right? And so we revere him for that. A few years prior to his death, Bill Cardona and Harry Wolff, who brought constitutional iridology to North America, had a symposium. They invited Bernard Jensen to it. They presented him with a Lifelong Achievement Award. These people are just amazing people all the way around. And Bernard said, gave his blessings to Harry and Bill and said, keep going. You're going in the right direction. Keep working on this. Keep developing. Keep moving it forward. And for that, we love him. Harry was an American-born German, and he spoke and read German. And he got his hands on a book written in German by Joseph Deck. And from there, he started teaching the Deck style of constitutional iridology. He crossed paths with Bill Cardona, who at the time was a registered pharmacist. And Bill grabbed onto this. They started teaching workshops and classes all over the place. Bill then became the iridology instructor at Bastyr Naturopathic College in Seattle. He taught there for many years. And while he was there, he decided, yeah, pharmacy is not where it's at. The people keep coming in for the same drugs or stronger versions of the drugs. They're not getting better. He became a naturopath. He is now a very busy naturopath in Seattle. Bill was Harry. I always say that Harry was my first instructor, because when I came into iridology, I heard about the Harry and Bill, and I ordered some VHS. Oh, did I just date myself? VHS videotapes. And I studied those, and they made so much more sense to me than what I had learned about Jensenian iridology. And I kept studying those and studying those and studying those until at one point I reached out to Bill and I asked him, what would it take to bring you to Canada to teach the first constitutional certification course here? So we brought him up, and I certified as a constitutional iridologist under Bill in 1993, although I started studying it like 1990. As we look at iridology, we're not going to talk about all of these in great detail. We now recognize we've got the Jensenian style, Rayid or emotional iridology, and constitutional. Jensenian was originally taught by Bernard Jensen. He taught that the iris changes when the body changes, that we could add fibers that he described as healing lines into the eye when an area is healing, and that we could change, he called them lesions, we call them lacuna, that you could change the shape and size of lacunae by healing. And we now know that that is also not correct. Traditional iridologists have often done iris readings cold with no background information from the client. There was a well-known healer here in Calgary who was a Jensenian iridologist, and rumor has it, and I've had several of his clients, he retired a few years back, several of his clients come to me since then. And when I do iridology, they go, wow, this is way different from what we've had before. Apparently with this other Jensenian iridologist, you would go in, you would sit down, he would look at your eyes through his camera. I don't know if he would take pictures or not. And then he would tell you what was wrong with you. He would tell you what you were going to do about it, go out to the front desk and buy your supplements. The whole appointment would take 20 minutes and you dared not speak. If you tried to speak, my clients have said he would literally shush you. He did not want you to say a word. So that's cold with no background. In my opinion, not truly holistic. Holistic involves the whole person. It doesn't involve me knowing everything and telling you you know nothing. Traditional Jensenian iridologists have a different style from modern Jensenian iridologists. When Bernard passed away, his daughter-in-law, Ellen, who took over his practice and his business, updated his information and has largely made it harmonious with constitutional. There's still a few things that are not quite in line, but it's mostly there. So when she teaches more from a more constitutional perspective. So that's pretty cool, pretty cool. The Rayed style teaches that emotional traits are genetic and are revealed by markings in the irides. And so when we do emotional iridology, we are looking at the same markings that we look at if we're doing a physical assessment, but we're looking at it from an emotional perspective. Readings may be done cold, but information gathered from the irides can be combined with personal and family history information for interpretation. And that's just really cool when you can get a family constellation and you've got the parents and the children or the grandparents, generation 1, 2, and 3, and you can see not only how the iris markings have come down through the lines and through the different generations, but then when you start looking at the personality traits that are reflected in these markings, it's pretty interesting to see how accurate that can be. We don't do a lot of the Rayed in constitutional. There just is not time. Rayed was founded by Denny Johnson. Jim Burgess does it as well. He calls it behavioral iridology in the UK. John Andrews has his, I think he calls it behavioral iridology as well. Michelle Spray, I completely agree. Working with the whole person, so important. Michelle, thank you for that. Thank you for that. It's one of the reasons why I love doing constitutional iridology the way I do it, because it allows me to let me rephrase that. It guides me to ask the questions that need to be asked, to understand my client, yes, on a physical level, also on an emotional level, so that I can address them. Sometimes my clients don't need herbs and vitamins. Sometimes they need a flower essence. Sometimes they need to learn how to tap, right? Sometimes we need to work on that emotional, because if the emotional is out of balance, the physical can't be in balance, right? And so with doing iridology the way I do, it helps me to understand at a better level and very quickly, what should we be doing now? With constitutional, again, it originated with Joseph Deck and others. It's used by medical doctors in Italy, Germany, and Russia. Correlative medical studies are being done, and this is exciting that research continues. And as it continues, it just makes what we do so much more valuable. It teaches that eyes are a reflection of the genetic structure of the body. And so this is so important. Also, the emotional structure, right? But it's genetic structure. And that means that what we see may or may not be manifesting as a symptom right now. But what we see in the eyes shows us predispositions. So if I see a particular marking and I go, and I'm combining it with other things, and going, yeah, we've got a predisposition here, but the client has no symptoms and there's no family history, because remember, these markings are passed down from 3 to 4 generations, then I know that what I want to be doing with that predisposition is working preemptively. I want to be slipping in some nutrition, maybe some general supplementation, to make sure that we can at least stall off, if not completely prevent, that problem from manifesting. And that's a beautiful thing. It also means that when we see markings in the eyes that correlate precisely with our client's symptoms, we don't need to scare the daylights out of them. We can simply look at the eyes and say, these markings together absolutely corroborate why you've got that symptom. Now we understand, because of where these markings are and what they are, we understand how we need to work to bring the body back in line and to help get these symptoms under control. What the client needs to do for their wellness for the rest of their life to stay well, right? And that is empowering. When I used to do Jensenian, I was just scaring the daylights out of people. I wasn't empowering, I was fear-mongering. As a constitutional iridologist, I empower people to take charge of their health in baby steps. And so just checking the comments here, Michelle says, exactly, sometimes they just need to feel like someone finally hears them. Absolutely. Sylvia says, hate when someone sends you eye pictures and asks you for a reading. Yeah, this isn't tea leaves, folks, right? I will not do an iris analysis by email. If I've got a virtual client who, can't come in, I will have them send me photos, and only if the photos are good enough, they don't have to be perfect, but they've got to be good enough, will I then let them book an appointment to do a Zoom session with me, right? Because I need that conversation. I'm not playing party games here, right? And I think that when people do these readings online, it's tantamount to a party game. I think it cheapens what we do. A medical doctor would not give a diagnosis on a Facebook page, right? Why not? Legal liability, they don't have enough information. Ditto for iridologists, right? Okay, that's the soapbox. Constitutional iridology is the foundation of dynamic iridology. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So in constitutional, it teaches the iridology does not give us answers. It tells us what questions to ask. Other iris and sclera changes may continue to be visible with time, revealing areas that need support. I want you to consider the iris especially like any other tissue in the body. Like my hair has not always been gray. I have not always had crow's feet. These are changes that happen over time based largely on genetics, right? Same with what we see in the iris. The sclera is more dynamic. The sclera has a genetic influence, but also shows us where the hot spots are right now and shows us in general a category of what those hot spots may be and where they are so that we can work on them. And with enough solid work, we may be able to calm the sclera markings down, which would show us that we were making progress. Background information is important. Readings are not done cold. All right, so let's look at some eyeballs. Sound good? When I started learning iridology in 1979, constitutional iridology had not yet reached Canada, and it was not even widespread across the US. I studied with a local teacher who had studied with Bernard Jensen, and I read books by Bernard Jensen, and I was doing what I was taught. And after about 5 years, I was getting frustrated because it wasn't working. 10 years in, I was finally to the point where I was ready to throw in the towel. And that's when I was very blessed to begin to have the opportunity to start learning constitutional iridology. Back then, if I saw an eye like this, I had been taught that every one of these loops was a lesion. Every one of them meant there's a pathological problem happening right now that needs to be addressed. Of course, if you've got that many problems, you've got big problems, right? You're probably not walking into my office under your own steam. And so as I would say, well, your eyes show you've got this problem and 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 this coloring here, this problem, my clients would go, no, 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 no. Well, maybe that one. Nope, nope. And so, and I was taught that if there were lines in here, that meant that healing had happened. But I had nothing from before to show that there were no lines there previously, right? I was taught that if we did enough fasting and enough cleansing, we could get rid of these. We could first off fill them all in with lots of lines, and then these would dissolve. I was taught we could get rid of any of these miscolorations in the eyes, that these colors were not supposed to be there, that this meant this person was toxic, we better cleanse you, fast you, put you on this special program. And we did that. We did that. And nothing changed. And we fasted and we cleansed and we worked. And my clients felt better. They were feeling better. But the eyes weren't changing. And they wanted their eyes to change as proof that we were making progress. The change in their symptoms wasn't enough for them because I told them the eyes would change, right? Yikes. I promised them something that wasn't happening, and the results they were getting didn't seem to be enough. Okay, so fast forward. In constitutional iridology, Lacunae show us where there may be inherited challenges. When we see this many lacunae, each and every one of them is likely not important. Instead, that creates their constitution. So this person we know is going to constitutionally have a greater risk of endocrine imbalances. Okay. And we also know that this person, because of the way we've got a lot of fibers that are crossing over other fibers throughout the eye, might be a little bit more prone to some structural challenges, that they might be more prone to sprains and things like that more easily. So when I see this kind of an eye, if this is a woman in her, let's pretend she's in her mid 40s and she's coming in with hot flashes, and I see this, I'm thinking, yeah, because your endocrine system wants to be out of balance. Let's talk about your diet. Let's talk about your exercise patterns. Let's talk about your sleep. What do we need to do to bring that endocrine system into balance? Right? I'm not going to cleanse her. I'm not going to fast her. I'm going to build her. And as I build her, her body strength, her overall cellular strength improves, and her body can automatically self-cleanse at a gentle pace. Instead of, doing some kind of a cleansing fast that takes her 2 weeks to do, knocks her flat on her back, makes her feel like garbage because she's not getting calories to sustain herself, right? And that's hard to do. But we keep her going now because we are feeding her better foods and we're gradually increasing the level of her health. This allows me to encourage her to, ask about her energy levels. What are her blood sugars like? Does she get sleepy after 2 o'clock? Is she craving carbohydrates? Is she using caffeine to try to keep going through the day? I see indicators in here that her stomach may not be as robust as we want it to be. How does she digest her proteins? Does she get farty with proteins or burpy with proteins? Does she learn to avoid proteins because they feel too heavy in her stomach, right? And so we can look at those things and then support the digestion and make dietary recommendations to help her get the protein she needs, but to digest it well without having negative side effects. This eye with all of these lacunae also tells me that she has a creative side. So my question is, what are you doing to honor your creativity? Nothing. Okay, so let's define creativity. I'm not meaning, can you sing, dance, and do two-dimensional or three-dimensional artwork? Oh, do you garden? Yeah, what kind of gardening? I love my flowers. Oh, do you feel like that's a creative thing? When you plant them, you water them, they grow, you appreciate the beauty. Maybe you pick the flowers, you dry them, or you make bouquets. Oh, yeah. I had one client who said, I don't do anything creative. And I said, well, what do you like to do when you're relaxing? I like to go for walks. And when you go for walks, where do you go for walks? I have a beautiful park that has a lot of wild growth in my area. Oh, and so when you're in that park and you're walking, what do you notice? I notice little things like little tiny flowers. Oh, and what do you do when you notice a flower? I actually sit and I look at it for 4 or 5 minutes. Oh, and then what do you do? Well, I'll take a picture of it. Cool. What would it feel like if you had a sketchbook and you could draw that little flower? Not for anybody else, but just for you. Oh, she said, that's interesting. So she started doing it, and it was a turning point in her health. Right? We got to honor the whole body. So those are things that I never would have suggested, never would have known to suggest in my former iridology lifetime. Oh, this poor person, all the uneven pigmentation in this eye, you are toxic. Oh my goodness, we need to cleanse you. And when we do, your eyes are going to change color. Client gets all excited. I've always thought my eyes were murky and ugly. What color would they be? Well, we do this hard enough, long enough, they might turn blue. I would love to have blue eyes. So now they want to do all this cleansing work to change their eye color. Oh my goodness. It's not going to happen. Right? And so one of the teachers who taught me iridology had before and after pictures that looked really convincing. The lacunae looked smaller, pigments looked different. eyes kind of looked bluer. I didn't know anything about photography back then or the technology of photography. Yeah, I had a camera, but I didn't understand all the parameters of it. Did you know that something as simple as changing the lighting for your photography will change the size of the pupil? And as soon as you change the size of the pupil, you stretch out or you compress those iris fibers, which changes the appearance of the eye. And as I looked back in these books and saw before and after pictures, the thing that had changed was the camera lighting. Sometimes now that I know what I'm looking for, I can even tell they used not just a different intensity of lighting, a different light source that had a different color. That'll change the color you see in the eyes. And sometimes we can just see that they've changed so many things. Sometimes they've used color filters to do a before and after photo. So it's so important to recognize that the tech changes the output. And I can prove that. I've got a camera, a professional camera, and I've got two different illuminators or light setups for it. One of them uses fiber optics and the other has built-in LED flashes. And the colors they put on the screen are entirely different one from another. So I need to know which camera or which lighting I'm using and what my settings are to then understand the output to assess that photograph properly. It's another reason why it's not great for people to send photos, because you don't understand the parameters of their photography, right? So in constitutional, I would look at this and I would go, this is a person for whom the liver and the kidneys dominate, control everything. This person functions in their sympathetic nervous system. So they're always in fight, flight, or freeze. I heard another one to add to that: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. When they start groveling for and pandering for attention and for winning approval kind of thing. The darker areas, zone 1 and 2, suggests that we probably need to be supporting digestion directly, but also through the liver function. We also want to be supporting kidney function. We also need to look at how the nervous system is working. Remember, when a person is functioning in the sympathetic nervous system, things like their predisposition towards depression, anxiety, ADD, ADHD, mental health issues skyrockets. And so when we see this, we need to backtrack it and think, okay, what's happening in their life? What is their diet? What supplements are they using, if any? Do they exercise? Can they digest their food to get their nutrients out of their food? And if they can't, do we need to support that as well? Right? No sense in giving them supplements if their digestive system isn't working well, right? And so when we see all of this in the context of what the client's symptoms are, we then understand what questions we need to ask to get the answers we need to create a protocol. And I strictly believe that protocols should be created step by step. I do not believe that I should be looking at their eye and assessing every little marking that I see and giving an individual assessment or remedy for each of these in the very first appointment. That's like going to a Chinese buffet that has 100 different foods on the table and saying you have to have a serving of each one of these. Your body goes, can't do it, right? So with the way I teach iridology, I teach my students to prioritize. What is the first thing you need to do? There's usually two things. You usually need to work on digestion a little bit, and then you need to work on whatever the client's primary symptom is that brought them in. Fail to do that, fail to give that good time and attention, your client will not feel heard. They're not coming back. Okay. Does that make sense? Is this all making sense? Yes. Thank you, Professor. Love that. Yeah. Is any of this sounding new to any of you? Barbara's saying, yes, it makes sense. If this is sounding new, like a new approach to iridology, give me new in the comments box. I want to see if any of this is kind of like, ooh, haven't heard it this way before. Okay. Again, old iridology, the way we used to do it, every one of these would have been a pathological problem. This would have been a problem. This would have been a problem. Oh my goodness, what do we do with this? This is exactly how I was taught to do it, that this was all a problem. So what I learned from constitutional iridology, just absolutely brilliant, that we see in the eyes the weak links that are passed down from 3 to 4 generations. We know pigments are not from toxic exposure. We know that lacunae aren't because of something you've done to yourself. We know that we need to be asking questions, combining information, and then creating programs step by step. I always want my clients to be what I call a massive success in baby steps rather than a huge failure in one step. And I will tell you, with the way I used to do Jensenian style iridology, my clients were mostly failures in one step. Not good, not good. So this person might have challenges with their connective tissues because of what we see in the fiber structure. We might see issues with kidneys not keeping up, with the liver, with the lymphatic system, with the immune system. There's a lot of things that could be going on here. This is a young lady who has just started working with me. She's in her mid-20s. She and her husband are wanting to start a family, and her hormones are a mess, a complete and total mess. I would suggest, from what I'm seeing in her temperature charting and her menstrual cycle charting, she is borderline PCOS. I can, from her weight, I also suggest that she's probably there. And so what we want to do is we need to think about PCOS. What are all the things that are involved in PCOS? Another reason why you need your anatomy and physiology, right? You need to understand why things are, what's going wrong, why they're likely going wrong, so you can address the root cause. So with this young lady, we are starting with getting her to more accurately chart her basal temperature. And she's started cleaning up her diet a couple months ago before she started seeing me. So that is absolutely brilliant. We're going to keep encouraging her in that direction and giving her some even more specific directions so that we can really get her cycles down to a pattern that will enhance her fertility, right? And so again, probably need to work with digestion. I know she's got some digestive complaints, but again, we're not going to work with absolutely everything. I mean, we would work digestion, we would want to work kidneys, we'd want to work all these other areas, lots of liver, lots of connective tissue, but oh my goodness, we've got all kinds of lung and heart and brain and you name it in here. Can't do it all. And actually, when you think about it, you don't need to do it all, right? When you address the most significant areas, the things that have the biggest symptoms, when you find the roots of those, there will be spillover in positive effects to all of the other areas. So gradually, without even addressing every problem she has directly, you end up addressing every problem. Does that make sense? That we get a domino effect? Sylvia, I'm so glad that that's how you were taught to do iridology this way, this constitutional way. So happy to hear that. Old style iridology, I would have said this person was on the edge of a nervous breakdown and that this person has parasites and we'd better do parasite cleanses. With her, yeah, it's not how it is. This is the eye of an Asian woman in her mid-30s. She and her husband had been trying for 3 years to conceive with no luck. When I look at her eyes, I see, again, she's that anxiety tetanic constitution, which says she burns through her B vitamins. I see she's got a teeny tiny brown pigment here that teaches me she needs her B vitamins in a specific format. I see a radial fur going right through pituitary. and also one through the ovary and one through the uterus. So I'm thinking, what's going on? She's in her mid-30s. She's got the beginning of a lipemic diathesis, which tells me her liver enzymes are likely out of balance and not managing her carbs properly, which means she's either throwing her carbs into cholesterol that is not well balanced or into blood sugar issues. So asking her menstrual cycles were typically 90 days apart. And she had been diagnosed at the fertility clinic. They'd been there and had no luck with diagnosed with PCOS. And I said, well, have they also said anything about maybe being type 2 diabetes? So I wasn't telling her she had it, but I was asking if they had discovered that. Oh, yeah, type 2 diabetes. And what have they done? Well, they've given me metformin and Clomid. And I'm going, oh, my freaking heck. They didn't give you any dietary guidelines. They didn't give you any lifestyle guidelines. They just said, take these drugs. So we did, seeing her eyes like this, it made perfect sense. We needed to get control of her blood sugars, get her liver functioning better, and get her hormones balanced. And 99% of that, well, maybe not 99, 75% of that is dietary, right? And the other 25% is supplemental, giving her the right herbs and vitamins to support ovulation and implantation, and then carry the pregnancy through, and getting her blood sugars balanced. Because as you know, type 2 diabetes and PCOS have an extremely high rate of miscarriage. And if they don't miscarry early on, type 2 diabetes, there's a really high rate of premature prenatal mortality, where the infant dies at about the 37-week mark. You don't want to have that happen, right? We got her totally balanced, got her off the metformin, got her blood sugars balanced perfectly. She and her husband were amazing rock stars at following instructions. And it took them 18 months, and they never missed an appointment, an appointment every month. They never missed an appointment. She gave birth to a beautiful baby boy, perfect health. So Robin says, do you help patients wean off medications like metformin, or do you have them stop? I do not give them recommendations on their medications. I work with them to bring balance to their body, and then I suggest that they work with their doctor to regulate their meds. I am not licensed to give to give recommendations on drugs. And so I cannot do that. And I would never do that. You'll be bringing me lunch in a picnic basket while I'm behind bars if I do that. And so you never tell a client, unless you are a licensed medical doctor or a licensed practitioner who can advise about drugs, you do not tell them to stop a medication. You always give them information. What they do with it from there is their own business. But I always tell them, I want you to work with your doctor or your pharmacist or whoever you need to balance this medication as we are working, right? Because our goal with our dietary work was to get her blood sugars in balance and to bring her hemoglobin A1C into a normal range. And as we're seeing that those are coming down beautifully, then that gives leeway for her to go to her doctor or her pharmacist or whoever she needs to work with to say, hey, my blood sugars are coming under control. This is what I'm doing with my diet, and this is what I'm doing with my lifestyle. Can we experiment with reducing these drugs? At which case most doctors will say, yeah, let's try reducing it. Let's see what happens. And we just keep rinsing and repeating until the client is no longer on the medications, right? So that's a really important point. We never counsel a client to stop a medication. I will pull out my drug reference books. I will show them what the list of side effects are. There have been times when I've asked them, how do you feel about doing an experiment? You can see that all of the symptoms you have are actually side effects of this drug you're on. I'm going to suggest go to your doctor and talk about this, or weigh it out in your own mind. And there's no life-threatening for the drugs that I'm thinking of particularly. There would be no urgent life-threatening issues if they stopped the meds. So I will sometimes say, I'm asking you to consider doing an experiment. Notice I'm not telling her to do it. I'm asking you to consider doing an experiment. How would you feel about perhaps stopping that medication for 10 days to see how you feel, or for a week to see how you feel? Knowing at any point, if you feel like you need to go back to it, you go back to it, and we just work around it, right? But I will never tell them they should stop. Not my job. Not my job. At any rate, if I didn't have iridology to see these confirming markings of the radial furrows sitting where they sit, that teach us nerve interruptions to those areas and possible toxicity able to leach into those areas. If I didn't see the contraction furrows, the lipemic diathesis, and there were some sclera markings that we aren't going to get into as well, that suggested some issues. If I hadn't seen that, I wouldn't have known the best way to work with her. And as it was, we had huge, huge success. So what do I think the future of iridology is? Well, as long as there is good research being done, and as long as iridology instructors are willing to adopt and keep up with and teach new validated information and let go of old disproved information, I think we stand a chance. We also need iridologists in general to keep up to date with the latest research and to not be stuck on my teacher said this when new information comes out. If I had done that, I would still be frustrated with Jensenian, and I'd still be giving my clients not the best information, at least in my opinion, right? And so we need to let go of things that don't work. We need to move forward. The fact that we're not letting go of things that don't work is what's giving us the label of being quacks and of this being called a pseudoscience. We have to move forward. It's our choice. We can get current and stay current with the progress and the science and move forward, or we can cripple the science, cripple the profession by never moving forward. If you had a heart problem, you would want a cardiologist who was up to date on the latest whatever could be done. You know, if you needed a heart transplant or a pacemaker, you would want someone who knew the latest. You wouldn't want someone from 1965, right? Someone who'd never updated anything. They're not going to know how to do it. So having said that, quick little commercial here. The Dynamic Iridology Assessment System is the only live, online, fully mentored course for nutritionists, herbalists, and naturopaths who want to streamline their clinical work without sacrificing client care. Now, when I list these professions, I'm not limiting it to that. What I'm really saying is you have to have a college-level anatomy and physiology course under your belt. If you don't have that, I can't teach you. If you don't have that, reach out to me, and you want to study with me, let me know, and I'll hook you up with an A&P course that is tough. But when you're done with that course, take you about 3 months to do it if you can spend an hour a day on it. When you've got that, I know you are ready to come into my program. And the idea here is so that you won't have to be doing iridology reports and things like that outside of client hours. You see your client, you do the iris assessment, you are able to assess, ask the right questions, create the program, get it all done in that hour that you are with them, and work from there. Robin B says she signed up today. Yay! Yay! So good. So good. Yes. And I think I've seen yours come in. I'll be making sure you get everything you need today. And Barbara Ferguson did too. Yes. Yes. Okay. So good. So the purpose here again is to help you to be well-trained and confident, right? Well-trained and confident. So the next course starts on April 11th. Registration is open now. You only get in if you speak to me personally. We have to have a Zoom meeting. This is where we talk, we make sure you've got the A&P. We make sure that you understand everything that you're going to receive in the course. We make sure our energy is good together, right? That you're going to be a good mesh in our community. That's so important. And we do that through a little meeting. And those of you who've signed up know can vouch for the fact that this is not it's not a hard sell. I'm not here to twist your arm into doing anything. I'm here to help you see if this is a good fit, to make sure that is the right fit. One of my prior students, who is one of our certified grads, I asked her, how did this help her? Iridology has helped me to understand the relationships between different organs and organ systems more in depth. She was a CNHP when she came to me. She knew this, right? She knew how the organs work together, but it's more in depth. Iridology also gives me an advantage of seeing the potential for different genetic traits and qualities that may be underlying. By observing the constitution, for example, you can extrapolate how the person's body will likely respond to applications of healing methods. Therefore, it has helped me to expand my knowledge and increased efficiency at providing more precise recommendations for health-oriented options. So love that. So what do you get in this course? I'm just going to give you a brief overview. It's 20 live interactive webinar classes like what we're doing today, except that you get to have your camera and your mic on, and we have a lot of conversation. 20 classes, one a week, 2.25 to 2.5 hours each, recorded for playback on demand for you. Live group mentoring twice each month. So we have a separate webinar twice each month where students can bring cases they're working on, ask questions about business, about marketing, about things they need clarification on, anything. This is where we cover a lot of things that are not in the curriculum, right? Anything that's iridology related. We have a private group on the MeWe platform for students and alumni. Again, it's a great place to post iris images, to ask questions, to get feedback, and to support other students. And students and grads are in here. So office hours and the MeWe group, whether you're a student, a graduate, or an alumni, or certified, if you've been my student in dynamic iridology, you are welcome to stay in these groups for as long as I'm teaching. You receive the 225-page digital textbook as a download. It's the book I wrote. It's been approved by IPA as being a valid and approved of textbook. And it's digital so that when we need to update curriculum or when there's new research that needs to be in there, I can update it and make it available to my students. You also get 45 pages of digital study notes. We call those the cheat sheets, just to help spur your memory when you're with a client. I include the IPA certification mentoring. Most teachers charge extra for this. I include this in your tuition. So whether you certify or not, that's your choice, but you have the option of certifying. And I know for a fact that I offer more support to my students than anybody else does. I know it. So the next course again starts on April 11th. Registration is open. You can use that link that I put in the chat box for you, tinyurl.com/dynamic-iridology, to schedule a time to chat with me to see if this course would be a good fit for you. So good to have you with us today. And again, for those of you who watch this on the replay, please remember to like it, share it, drop a comment, subscribe to the channel. And for those of you who are interested in learning more about the course, schedule a Zoom meeting with me. Let's talk. Let's see if this is the right course for you and if it's the right time for you. I look forward to speaking with you soon. Make it a healthy day. Bye for now.